Imam al-Ba'li rahimahullah is actually going to begin with the manners of entering Mecca. And he begins and he says that it is recommended to enter during the day, during the daylight hours, in particular around duha or so. This is what is recommended, though it is absolutely nothing wrong with entering Mecca at night. And it should be done from its peak, and this is called the Gap of Kadat, or Thaniyat Kadat, which is kind of like a little mount or hillock of sorts, located in the northern part of the city. So if you're coming from Medina, you're going to more than likely pass by that area to enter into Mecca. And then when you exit Mecca, the manner here is prescribed that you exit southbound from the Gap of Kuda, which is another little hill or small mountain type structure, and that's kind of going southbound outside. So coming in northbound and then exiting Mecca southbound. He said the masjid should be entered from the door of Bani Shayba. Bani Shayba, believe it or not, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the houses were constructed around the masjid, kind of in circular, pattern, much like you would expect. The tawaf is like that, and so they constructed their homes within relative proximity to the masjid. And what they did was, for every 2 homes that were built, they would leave a pathway to go into the actual mataf area, so people could make tawaf and the rites of Hajj. And so the Bab Bani Shayba actually marks a pathway which was directly adjacent to the house of a man named Shayba. And so that used to have a marker on it. And the door of Bani Shayba is actually directly opposite from the door of the Kaaba, which is, right there where the black stone is. The Multazim is there, the door of the Kaaba. So just opposite of that, which is also where the Maqam Ibrahim is, that is the actual entryway that's prescribed or recommended that you go kind of into the mataf area from there. It's no longer marked like it was. It was marked with this kind of a nice, a semicircle of a door. And if you look at old pictures of the Kaaba, you'll find that was something that did remain for quite some time as a marker. Though, of course, entering from anywhere is permissible. This is just what's recommended, as was the practice of the Prophet ﷺ. He says, whoever sees the Kaaba is to raise their hands and say what has been narrated. So when you see the Kaaba, the first time that you see it, you raise your hands in supplication, and you can say, Allahumma anta salam, wa minka salam, hayyana rabbuna bis salam, which basically means, oh Allah, you are as-salam, peace, and from you is peace, and therefore we ask of you to bestow us with peace. And then, once you have done that, you begin tawaf, right? So the tawaf will be begun for umrah if you are a mutamattir. You're making tamattu', which means you're going to make umrah followed by hajj. Right? You're going to make both umrah and hajj. Or you're going to make tawaf qudum, which is the arrival tawaf if you are a mufrid, making the ifrad, or qarin, which you're going to be making qiran, right? So the mutamatti', he basically starts making tawaf, or she, for umrah. But if you're not making umrah, you're going to make tawaf qudum. And this is how you greet the Kaaba. You greet the Kaaba by making this initial tawaf, like when you greet the masjid is done with prayer, tahiyatul masjid. Men should tuck the middle of the top wrap under their right shoulder in all 7 circuits unless carrying someone excused. And so this, as you know, when you're wearing the what we know as ihram, which is the ridat, which is the top kind of sheet, and the bottom sheet is called the izar. So when you have the ridat on, it's over both of your shoulders, But when you begin to make the tawaf, you expose the right shoulder by wrapping it under your arm and then draping it over your left shoulder. So the one side is already over the left shoulder, and then this one you drape it over in the opposite way. And the right shoulder will remain exposed during this tawaf, which the tawaf is in a circuit of 7 rounds or laps. It will remain exposed for the entirety of this tawaf, and then it will be covered, and that's it. So we're going to see the shoulder, we're going to have it exposed for this portion of the rites, and then we will cover it and leave it covered for the remaining rites of Hajj, as opposed to leaving it exposed throughout the entire duration. He says that, of course, during this tawaf, the first 3 laps around the Kaaba are done for men at a particular pace. Ramal is not walking, it's not running, it's kind of short-stepped or short-strided jogging, right? Where you pick up the pace a little bit, but you increase the number of footsteps. So it's almost like a trotting of sorts. And that will happen 3 times around the Kaaba. And of course, he'll address that shortly as to who's supposed to do that versus who's not. He says, it is begun at the black stone. So your tawaf begins from the black stone. So the various corners, the 3 other corners, if you begin to make the tawaf there, it doesn't actually start to count until you reach the black stone. So if you've come in and you can't see the black stone, you have to kind of adjust your position to get around to where the black stone is. That's when you're going to actually begin your tawaf. And it is begun by facing it, or a part thereof, with the entire body. So you're going to direct your entire body to the black stone, or a portion of the black stone. Your entire body is going to be directed to it. Then it is touched with the right hand, kissed and prostrated upon. So you touch it, then you kiss it, and then you can prostrate on the black stone. If that is difficult, it is touched with the hand and kissed. Thronging, jarring each other about, pushing and shoving, pulling, fighting, should be avoided. You do not want to harm any of the pilgrims or any of the residents, anyone that is visiting the sanctuary. You don't want to harm them in order to fulfill a sunnah. Okay? So the obligation is, to keep people safe. The sunnah is to touch the black stone, kiss the black stone, etc. You don't want to sacrifice an obligation for the sake of a recommended act. If that is difficult, it is touched with something, then it is kissed. So if you can't actually kiss the black stone, you're going to touch it with your right hand, and then you'll kiss the hand. If you can't reach it with your right hand, then you can actually extend something like a cane or something of that sort. You can touch the black stone with that. It says if that is difficult, it is touched with something which is then kissed. If that is difficult, a gesture with the hand or something is made without kissing it. So if you can't get close enough to touch it, then you make a gesture with the hand, and you do not kiss the hand. And the same thing goes for the Yemeni corner. They call it Ruknul Yamani. So that is also a corner that you can touch. So these are the 2 places on the Kaaba that while you're making your tawaf, you would touch. Right? So if you can touch the black stone, you touch it. If you come around to the Yemeni corner, you touch it if you can. If you cannot touch either of the corners, you make a gesture with your hand. And when you're passing the black stone, you will direct your face to it. And then you will say whatever supplication has been narrated. And that's where you would find those little books of dua to come in handy. It says, then with the Kaaba on the left side here, those coming from far away, they call this al-ufuqi, those that have come from outside of Mecca or the general vicinity of Mecca, they are to jog with short strides. So if you are actually in Mecca and you made ihram from Mecca, you don't do this ramal the first 3 times. Only if, for example, you've come from outside. You've come from Medina or somewhere else outside of Mecca. You are not considered from that place, or you're not actually residing there. And so you're going to make this short strided jog in the first 3 circuits of tawaf. Upon completion of tawaf, 2 rak'ahs are prayed, which are best done behind al-maqam. 2 rak'ahs, whether that is a nafila, a voluntary prayer, or if it's an obligatory prayer, that will suffice. So if, for example, you finished tawaf and you made your way to the maqam, behind maqam Ibrahim, and they called the iqamah for dhuhr or asr or any of the prayers, you pray that and that's sufficient. It fulfills this recommendation to pray after tawaf. And that should be done after every tawaf. So not just during the rites of Hajj or Umrah, but if you're making voluntary tawaf, you're going to make tawaf in 7 circuits and conclude that with rak'atain, 2 units of prayer behind Maqam Ibrahim. If you can't get behind Maqam Ibrahim, then you can pray anywhere that you're comfortable and find space. He says an obligatory prayer will suffice instead. Then the stone is touched. So after you make tawaf for Umrah and you've prayed rak'atain, you're going to go back to the black stone and touch it if possible. And then you exit for sa'i. And this is made from the door of Safa. So Safa is the closest mount from the Kaaba. Safa, and then the furthest is Marwa. And then you're going to climb onto Safa. And it's preferred that you climb high enough so that when you turn back, you can actually see the Kaaba. You're going to look towards the Kaaba, make takbir 3 times, and then what has been narrated of the various supplications. Yeah, so the supplication, one of them, he says, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulku wa lahul hamd, yuhyi wa yumit wa huwa hayyun la yamut, biyadihi al-khair wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, la ilaha illallah wahdah, sadaqa wa'da wa nasara abda wa hazama al-ahzabi wahdah. So this is a rather long supplication, or a type of dhikr that's said, and then you can supplicate with whatever it is that you wish. And there are multiple things that can be said while you are standing on Safa. Okay? So this is where you're going to take time in order to make a number of different du'as. And then when you're done, you descend from Safa, walking to the first marker. There are green markers that are in the lane from Safa to Marwa. Those green markers have been there for generations, and they mark the area for running. And this was has to do with the story of who?
Hajar.
Yes, Hajar and Ismail. The story where she was running back and forth looking for water. And so from this first green marker, just before the green marker, by a couple of feet, if you will, or a yard or 2, you begin to run swiftly. And this is done for men, not for women. You begin to run swiftly from that marker just before it until you reach the next marker. And then after that, you walk and climb Marwa. Basically, if you can climb up onto it, that's preferred. And then you say the same thing that you did on Safa. So you go through the same supplication, the same remembrances that you did when you were on Safa. And then you descend, you walk back, and then you run where running is prescribed to Safa, doing it 7 times. So each departure from Safa is counted as 1 lap, and each return back is counted as a lap. So if you go from Safa to Marwa, that's 1. From Marwa to Safa, that's 2, 3, 4, until you conclude with 7. It says it begins at Safa and ends at Marwa. So if for some reason you started making sa'i on Marwa, right? Maybe you had to leave the masjid to go refresh wudu, or tawaf, you have to have wudu to make tawaf. Sa'i, it's only recommended that you have wudu. So let's say you wanted to go and refresh your wudu, and then you ended up at Marwa, and now you're going to make your way over to Safa. That doesn't count as one lap. That's you getting to the starting line. Okay? You see what I'm saying? So then you get to Safa, and then you begin counting 1, 2, until you conclude with 7. He says beginning from Marwa does not count as an actual lap.